Well, hello everyone. We're live. I'm here with Aidan. There was earlier a Twitter space hosted by James Fishback talking about the state of the debate community in both high school and college. And in it, Aidan mentioned that he was, an opponent of immigration. So I decided, I'm very supportive of immigration, so it might be a good thing to discuss. So we're going to discuss that. So I think the basic case for immigration is that, like immigration, the people who immigrate, it makes their lives dramatically better, and I think it makes the lives of the people in the country that receives immigrants better. The first point is pretty trivial. People have no incentive to immigrate unless it makes their lives better, and we know that going from, for example, various South American countries to the United States often increases people's productivity by a factor of more than 10. We know that about 27% of the GDP of developing countries comes from remittances, which are people who come to wealthy countries and send money back. And so it's like, wait, sorry, there's some echo, or there was for a second. I think it's gone. But yeah, so I think and it turned out so if we got rid of all of remittances as a result of halting immigration, this would have more of a deleterious effect on the GDP of developing countries than the Great Depression did in the US. So this would be really bad for other countries. And then the question is, okay, what effect does it have on the US for us to accept immigrants? And I think that it has good effects generally. I think immigrants, some huge percentage of patents, I can find a statistic if you care, but so something like half of patents come from immigrants. And so just a huge amount of our productivity is tied to immigrants. A huge number of Fortune 500 companies were founded by either immigrants or the children of immigrants. Innovation is what makes it so that the economy grows over time. And then I don't think that the various concerns about immigration are at all well-founded. Okay. Yeah, so that's the basic pitch for immigration. Aidan, why am I wrong? You're on mute.
Sorry, I didn't want you to hear me eating. But basically, I don't see it so much as an economic issue, simply due to the fact that in economics, there's no such thing as like a free trade, a net positive or whatever. There's always some sort of trade-off happening. You might make something more valuable or add value, but fundamentally, you're just you're trading. You're making trade-offs. That's opportunity costs, and basic economics. When you bring up remittances and how it improves the lives of immigrants while also improving developing markets and whatnot, I don't think that not only is that beneficial for us or is that a case for us, but it's also not a good case for the other countries because you're taking skilled labor out of these countries where if there are immigrants coming here, perhaps they could start a business in their own country and seek foreign investment, or perhaps they could do something to change their own country. We brought up brain drain on the space earlier, and I think that's a very good argument against immigration because you really are sucking the best talent out of these other countries where they would be more beneficial at building these countries up. And when it comes to remittances, it is not our obligation. We pour money in the form of investments. We have the International Monetary Fund. We have USAID. We have all sorts of international development programs and foreign aid. And it's not just the United States, it's also Europe, and China's investing in a lot of African and South American countries. And I think it really boils down to a social issue because on the economic side of things, if you bring in a bunch of high achieving patent founders, CEOs, if you bring in all these programmers, sure, it might be productive for the country, but people that we grow up with, we're both very young, it appears, and people we grow up with that are paying $40,000, $60,000, $80,000 for a degree, they're going to be outcompeted by someone in India or Japan or Singapore or China even, where their schools actually produce better workers in a lot of cases. They're getting their education for comparatively cheaper. And that means that there is a net trade off for people already living here. America is a country for a reason. We are a sovereign nation for a reason. We have an obligation to take care of our people. So when we allow remittances to leave our country, I'm sure if you're center left, you would be in favor of social programs. Why is it that we must accept an immigrant from another country as opposed to someone that was born here that could have received that job and gotten a higher wage comparatively, and is instead unemployed and has food stamps? Because the more immigrants, whether they're high skilled or low skilled, especially in illegal immigration, and this has been the case since the founding of America, whether it was blacks or poor Europeans and now Mexican immigrants, illegal immigrants and low poor class immigrants have always been used as a way to undercut the working wage. If you have more available cheap labor, why would you pay me $15 to go work in a field when you could pay someone pennies? And that is fundamentally true. And then that money doesn't go back into taxes or anything. It goes out of the country. So you're displacing people and jobs, you're devaluing essentially all the money that they invested into a degree. And then on the social aspect, we see that countries all over the world, I would, Trump came out with a plan that said he would ban anyone from a communist country or communist ideology. And I'm on board with the Muslim Arab ban too. I think we should go a step further, build the wall. I don't want anyone from Canada. I don't even want anyone from Europe. Because if you look at the trend in terms of productivity, when you're forced to work with the resources you have, you're forced to innovate. Not only would it save us in the form of remittances and trade imbalances and whatnot, and we could talk about globalism too, because I don't believe in importing workers or exporting jobs to cheaper workers, but any tax gains that would be made or any relief from social programs by having these jobs available, that would also be beneficial to social cohesion. Why do you want, or why would anyone, rather, for that matter, want a bunch of poor families in Appalachia? Why would we want poor inner city communities? Because socioeconomic factors definitely play a role in these issues in terms of crime and social fabric. If we're importing a bunch of low wage immigrants, they're most likely going to live in densely populated areas. There's going to be more income inequality as large corporations take advantage of the labor. Wage inequality is going to start destabilizing. And not only that, if you're bringing a bunch of people that don't share your values or speak the same language or any of that, then you're tearing the social cohesion apart. I mean, there are literally like riots in France right now because of all the immigration. There is so much racial tension in a place that has been historically just French people, and now they're importing North Africans. And if you look at the crime rates from illegals or people that we import from certain countries, they're much more likely to commit violence. There's definitely some truth to programmers and H-1B visas and those sort of workers not committing crime. I mean, obviously they got an H-1B visa and a tech degree for one reason or another. But my fundamental point is it's not so much about economics that we should be concerned about, which is an interesting position to take on the center left, is to go for an economic issue. But I see it more through the lens of wage protectionism and social conservatism.
Yeah. So, I mean, there was a lot there. Do you have any preference in which order we take the points? It seems like maybe the cultural point was the biggest point about how it erodes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I think I don't think that this is accurate. So, I mean, there is a report by Alex Nostrata, who he's written a lot about immigration, and it looked basically at just comparing the cultural values of immigrants to non-immigrants. And it concluded that, well, so number one, immigrants are roughly as patriotic as non-immigrants. Number two, 71% of all immigrants think that America is a better country than most other countries, compared to 73% of native-born Americans. Three, immigrants are more likely to be proud to be Americans than non-immigrants. Four, immigrants are more likely to be proud of America's equal treatment of everyone than non-immigrants. Five, immigrants are less likely to be ashamed of aspects of America than non-immigrants. And six, immigrants are more confident in U.S. institutions than non-immigrants are. And so, like, I think the basic point is that if we actually just look at how patriotic and how much immigrants share cultural values, it seems roughly similar between. It seems like they're generally more patriotic. You have, like, if you look at the people who really hate America, and hate our role in the world, it's often like self-hating white woke liberals rather than Hispanics who are coming from Mexico. And so I think, yeah, so I don't think that the concern about culture is founded. And, the Nostra report, there are various other sources that I've compiled in an article that I've linked to the comments that finds a similar thing. The last point is that I don't actually think that, like banning immigration makes people, if we prohibit one immigrant, we make their lives dramatically worse. People's lives are just many times better in the U.S. They're many times more productive. They're able to have a much better life for their children. And so it's like, do we really think that it's worth making it so that people's lives are dramatically better just because we think that they might have bad cultural values? No, I don't think that's true. For example, I don't think that we should kick out America hating woke liberals, even if they, even if we think that would be good for our culture. And the reason for this is just, you shouldn't violate people's rights and make them dramatically worse off. Well, I'm sort of a utilitarian, so I don't really believe in rights. But, if you do believe in rights, you shouldn't make people dramatically worse off based on a sort of scant benefit to the culture. The last point that it's worth making, and Richard Hanania has a recent article about this where he makes this point, immigration has kind of, by the impact of immigration on our political system and on various dynamics like that is sort of unpredictable. So, for example, one of the reasons Florida is right wing is because of immigrants, because of all the Cuban immigrants who came. So I just think that the impact of immigration on culture is really unpredictable and uncertain. And the case for immigration is just really, really strong, that it makes lots of people's lives dramatically better. It's responsible for 27% of the GDP of various developing countries. And it's responsible for enormous amounts of firm productivity. So, yeah, I mean, you obviously disagree with some of the other points about immigration. We'll talk about those later. But, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, and I don't want to dispute any of those facts. Immigrants are more likely to assimilate to the dominant culture even. But even it, and I'll say, I have no personal reason to disagree with any of that. Most of the immigrants I meet are actually very great people, better than most Americans, to your credit. But like you said, it's very unpredictable, and I don't think that I want to take any chance to the social cohesion that we have, as it's already very split and divided and hyper partisan right now. And the issue isn't so much legal immigration, but illegal immigration. And I think we would both be able to come to a consensus that illegal immigration is bad. And
No.
I feel
No, I don't think that's true. Sorry, I think illegal immigration is good. I want there to be more of it. I mean, I don't think that it's immoral to break unjust laws, and I think that the laws against immigration are some of the worst laws. So, yeah, no, I am in favor of illegal immigration. Ironically, this is a position Milton Friedman famously, he had the position that immigration is good only when it's illegal, because the illegal immigrants don't get welfare. Now, in subsequent years, it's been the case that legal immigrants generally don't get welfare either, depending on the specifics of the program. But
yeah, I had a more moderate position at a certain point. Like, I'd say probably 2017 or 2018, my position was a little bit, more, oh, we should bring in people, we should legalize the people that came here illegally, we shouldn't deport anyone, but still build the wall because it's kind of necessary. And oh, we want to bring in computer programmers, and I'm like, oh, it's good for the economy. But the thing is, if you look at voting demographics, I am a conservative, And when immigrants assimilate into the dominant culture, and like you said, they trust institutions, I don't. So fundamentally, um, if they assimilate into the dominant culture, which seems to be wokeism right now, then that's a big problem.
Wait,
And
okay, wait. You think that immigrants are like disproportionately woke? Like, okay, this just doesn't match my experience of woke people. And then I think that if we just look at the data of like, they seem to love America at much higher rates than
well,
even
for example,
Americans.
the
It's like
Cubans especially, and I would agree with that, but because it is so unpredictable, and given like I said, given the current circumstances, I don't think you want to introduce any randomness to a culture that is already fracturing. Bringing in more people, especially when inequality is high and you have so many social issues dominating the culture war, it just doesn't seem like you bring in more people. It's like, to use a simple analogy, if we were at a party and there was a fight about to break out, there were some arguments, some heated words exchanged, you wouldn't want to bring in more people, especially more people that you're not familiar with, and say, oh, let's diffuse the situation this way. I wouldn't say maybe even a total ban on immigration in the future, but definitely a moratorium, because we have people that we don't document, and I can see a capitalist saying that illegal immigration is good because it drives down wages and it's good for business, like you said, but it's not good for the people. You're influxing a lot of people into highly populated areas. It's driving up home costs. You're driving up you're driving wages down. So houses go up, low income wages go down, then the
yeah,
money flows back into the country.
we'll dispute the wages point later, but yeah, I mean, in terms of the culture point about, I mean, I don't see a reason to think that it'll make Americans more polarized. I mean, maybe the thought is that it'll make us more polarized because there's some backlash to immigration. But I don't know. It seems weird to be opposed to immigration because you think other people will oppose immigration. It seems like if and opposing immigrate if immigration is restricted, this makes the lives of millions of people dramatically worse. And it seems like the bar for justifying this has to be more than, well, maybe they'll have inflame the culture war slightly, when it actually seems like they're disproportionately like hardworking people who are less likely to care about the culture war. And I think that the just scale of the harms of restricting the free movement of many millions of people is dramatically greater than potentially marginally inflaming the culture war. The point about like how immigrants are disproportionately left wing, that's true. I actually think this is a pro of immigration because I'm also left wing. But I think but I think even if you're not left wing, I think actually the overall impact of immigration on like the political arena is like really complicated, and I don't think it's clear that it's good for either the left or the right. So I mean, so immigrants, they do disproportionately vote for the vote left wing, but I mean, it's like quite conceivable that if there hadn't been immigrants, Trump wouldn't have got elected. It seems like immigration generates backlash from various people who incorrectly think that immigration hampers their wages, and as a result of that, you get the result that that like just a huge number of populists and of right-wing politicians trace their rise to immigration. So I just think that it's like the bar is you have to prove that it's worth making the lives of millions of people dramatically worse, making it so that people cannot pursue the freedoms afforded to them in the greatest country in the world, where you seem to agree that it's good for firm productivity, where it's responsible for a huge amount of new innovation. And then it's like, well, maybe it'll have some deleterious effect on our culture. There isn't much evidence for it. It seems like the bar for harming millions of people has to be much higher than that.
Well, I think the presumption that it's just going to harm people because it's the status quo, I just don't think that presumption is something that we can operate on. I don't think it's necessarily only up to me to prove that it would split the culture. I think there's also the need to reaffirm the idea that this immigration does actually help, because like I said, if you're taking in 1 million illegal immigrants in a year, I'm sure businesses would love that. Big corporations or farmers, it would be very beneficial to them to pay people illegally a very small wage. And then even worse, the wages go to another country. And it's like, if these immigrants are so good at productivity, if they're so intelligent and capable and creative and whatnot, why and they love America, they're patriotic, why don't they just stay there and make their country like America? And then we don't have to subsidize them. And we will spend less on military because their countries will be stable. We will be able to and if you spend less money on military and you have less poor workers coming in, maybe wages rise, you can see a lot of social relief. And there is an argument to be made that sure, they come over and make these patents or do these jobs, but there's no evidence to suggest that these jobs wouldn't get done in the first place, or that these ideas wouldn't be fostered in America. Someone is going to take that job, and
Yeah,
I
well,
think it should be an American.
yeah. The
And
point
as you said, they do vote excessively left wing, and right now that is being co-opted by a very hyper progressive left wing. And it's all fine and nice to be like, I'm a Kennedy Democrat from the 60s. That's all fine and well. I'd love to get back to a time when we could all be like that. But if they always vote left, and it doesn't matter whether they're center left or not, because the politicians themselves are overwhelmingly going to cave to the far left, then it is going to accelerate the destruction of my country. And I, like I said, I don't need to import a bunch of low skilled labor. I would rather drive the wage costs up and drive cost demand down. So that
Yeah,
way we can maybe restore some of this inequality. And I will say, exporting jobs in the form of globalism has not helped either, because either way, the point is that these large corporations that quite frankly don't pay a fair share in tax are trying to use immigration and globalism as a way to churn out very unequal profits. And honestly, I don't even think that they should be given all this credit for innovation or productivity, because they're using the cheapest labor available. If they had to pay fair wages, their profit margins would be greatly reduced. So I think that to an extent, this immigration and this globalism thing just inflates and masks the true nature of what's going on.
yeah. I mean, so you asked sort of why they allow, like, why didn't they just stay in their country and improve it? Well, very often their country like is just much worse than the United States. The U.S. has unprecedented opportunities that are not available in other countries. I mean, I think very often with a lot of the people who are immigrating from Latin America, the reason their country is fucked is specifically as a result of actions that were done by the U.S. So I think maybe there's some responsibility. So, for example, we backed the armed forces in Guatemala as they were carrying out atrocities. Same thing in Nicaragua, in Mexico. I think like most of the cartel guns that are in Mexico are trace their origin to the United States. So it's like, I mean, it's not just like, if we are responsible for ruining a country, then I think we have some moral obligation to the people there. At least that's sort of most people's moral intuitions that case. And I don't know. I mean, like, just sort of think about this from the perspective of an immigrant. Like, you're in a country where there's very low opportunities. If you come to the U.S., your wage can increase tenfold. If you come to the U.S., it's much freer. There's much less corruption. There's much less violence and homicide. You seem to be alluding, lastly, to the idea that it'll kind of accelerate the demise of America in some way. I'm still sort of looking for more details about that. What's the demise of America that immigration is supposedly accelerating? I don't even think that there's evidence that it's increasing our political division. But I don't, we've been divided throughout a lot of time in the U.S. I don't think there's a reason to think that the U.S. being slightly divided is going to be likely to result in any catastrophic problems that are anywhere near comparable to the benefits of immigration. I mean, the last point is just in terms of the political impact of immigration. I don't think that immigration. I don't like. I just think its political impact is super unclear. I mean, like the last Republican president probably traces his career to immigration. So, I don't. I think like if you're a hardline Republican and you think Republicans are better than Democrats, you should still just be really uncertain about the net effect that immigration will have, especially because immigrants, after a few generations, they become much less likely. They assimilate pretty well, and then they become much less much more like, Native Americans, as in Americans who have been here for a while, not like the people who Christopher Columbus falsely believed to be Indians. And so then they start voting for more Republicans. And then the last point, I guess, is that one of the big reasons why immigrants prefer Democrats to Republicans is because Republicans are constantly fear-mongering about them and passing policies that make it impossible for their family members to come to the country. I think that if the Republican Party wanted to get votes from immigrants, one way to do that would be to support immigration.
Well, and to go in on this, the first person that signed probably the most deleterious immigration act was George Bush, and he was a Republican. So this idea that somehow minorities are going to vote for Republicans is just not true. And the people we would import from Europe would be by de facto probably way more liberal. And fundamentally, if minorities are not going to vote Republican, especially because we don't race pander, which I think we can agree, like Black Lives Matter and all these other social movements, but specifically that, where you get things like defund the police, reparations, et cetera, these are obviously the more fringe side of things, but this is what's spearheading things. It's a lot of race politics that Republicans thankfully have not played into. They've played into nativism and nationalism, but I think that's fair, because I genuinely don't think we have any obligation to help out countries we destroyed. If anything, that's going to make things worse. I mean, if you look at the crime that has happened from Muslims and Arabs in countries like Sweden, they're having race riots in France, and those are just two countries that were perfectly fine before. If you look at the accelerating crime in certain areas, it does not look good, to say the least. And I have no ill will to speak of legal immigrants, because legal immigrants usually do not commit crime.
Well,
But that's not a lot of what we're getting, and we're getting a lot of refugees, asylum seekers. We're getting a lot of illegal immigrants that are just crossing the border, that are being trafficked across. There's there's drug trafficking going on, and the arms smuggling. I'm trying to Operation Fast and Furious. Obama's ATF was trying to track down cartel weapons, and so they mysteriously lost all the weapons, and they ended up in the hands of the cartel, and we don't know where they're at. But that's another story. And it's just like, they're not voting Republican. That's what I want to happen. So they're not adjusting to conservative values, conserving the country. They're adjusting to this liberal progressivism. I don't want that. Liberal progressivism destroys society. Illegal immigration, asylum seekers, they do destabilize the fabric. Maybe not H-1B visas or whatever, but it drives down wages. And if these people could succeed here, there is no reason that they might not be able to work together in their own countries and fix things themselves. Just because, and it sounds rough, but I genuinely don't feel any obligation to go help out people in countries we destroyed, because it's not my fault. I'm not going to atone for the sins of George Bush. That's just not who I am.
Yeah. I mean, so one question is, it seems like everything that all the arguments you're giving could also be used to justify with deporting woke academics. Would you support that?
Huh. Well, I'd have to think about that, but
Look, woke
probably not.
academics, they take jobs. They have these un-American values. They're inflaming the culture wars in various ways. If they went to Mexico, maybe they'd find some productive thing to do there. Why not deport woke academics?
Well, their existence here isn't inherently illegal.
Well, okay, let's talk about legal immigration, because you oppose that too. Legal immigrants, their existence here is also not illegal. And so the question is, should we change the law to make it so that it's illegal so that legal immigrants can't come here? Just as in the hypothetical, we would be changing the law to make it so that woke academics can't live here.
Well, I think restricting people into a country is a lot different than forcefully deporting them, because I would deport people for being an illegal resident of a country. I wouldn't deport them simply because they disagree with me, but I wouldn't allow them in if they disagree with me. It's like,
why? Like, I mean,
why?
it seems like you're giving justifications based on that they take jobs, that they have a bad effect on our culture, and that they, accelerate the culture war, things like that. It seems like none of those metrics is it relevant whether they're already here or uh, um, whether they're not. And then in terms of, like, I don't know, you might think, okay, well, America should represent the interests of Americans. I don't actually think that's true. Like, I think very few people actually think that's true, would take that seriously. Very few people, for example, think that we should, wage savage war on another country in order to slightly benefit ourselves.
You don't want to hear my position on Mexico then?
Oh, you support war with the cartels?
Yeah, well, like DeSantis
Oh,
is like, we're gonna stop all this with like a trade war, and that's lame. What's really cool is Trump saying he's gonna bomb the cartel. I'm even cooler, because I would just look, if it's our obligation to fix these countries or at least help these people out, like why help them out when we could just assist them? Like I like to make money. Why not just invest in a country? You get your money
yeah.
back. You don't have
Well,
to
wait. So, I mean, we can talk about going to war with Mexico in a bit, because I actually think that would be just a huge disaster, and I've written an article about this called something like War with Mexico. And I think it's like actually just a crazy idea that is like maybe the worst, like it's maybe the stupidest idea being proposed by the modern right, and it's sort of embarrassing that like Vivek and Ron DeSanctimonious and Trump all support this just utterly batshit insane lunacy. But anyways, so yeah, wait, so why? So I mean, just going back to the question, why not deport woke academics?
Deportation is based on someone being here illegally. They're not here illegally.
Well, we could pass. Well, okay, we could pass a law that would make it so that it's illegal for them to be here. We could pass a law that says, look, if you publish in postmodern journals, there's the door, or something like that. I mean, we'd have to specify it, but why not do that if we think that it's that the effect that they have on our culture is so dangerous?
I'm not going to deport you, and I'm not going to deport a woke academic because you guys are Americans and you belong here. You're my brothers and sisters. I have no obligation and no
Okay,
kinship to other people. I'm not an
yeah,
internationalist. A lot of us, like most of us, are not immigrants. Like we have our parents, our grandparents, our ancestors. They're buried in this soil. This is where they have invested into this country, and I'm you like American ideals, and you want an economic opportunity. But as I said on the space, I don't view this as an economic question. This isn't an economic zone. This is a country. It's not Canada. It's not Mexico. We don't have the same values. We don't share the same traditions, pastimes, any of that. America is special, and I want to keep it that way. So if you come here illegally, you're getting deported. If we have a disagreement, that's fine. But like I said, I don't care about an all-star team of immigrants. I care about building a team of all-stars, not buying them. And to further that point, if I'm already having an issue with woke liberals, why am I going to import more immigrants so woke liberals can tell them I'm the problem? I don't want the Somalian refugees from Minnesota. I don't want like violent criminals from MS-13 or Venezuelan
But
criminals or
yeah,
any
I
of
mean,
that.
as for the point about crime, we know that immigrants, both legal and illegal, commit crimes at lower rates than
Legal.
Americans who are already. No, this is also true of illegal immigrants.
And refugees have been committing substantial amounts of crime.
I think it's true that there are some countries from which refugees commit, I think, slightly higher rates. I haven't looked into that closely, but on net, immigrants commit lower rates of crime. I mean, okay, one last question, sort of along these lines. Do you think that? So let's suppose we had solid evidence that wokeness is very heritable. That most woke academics give
I
birth
believe
to
that.
woke academic kids. Would you support banning woke academics having kids? After all, those kids don't exist yet, so they're not American citizens. They don't yet have rights, and they're gonna take our jobs. Um,
No, I think that's an interesting counterplan, but I just don't think it's in the same topic or analogous at all because it's like, oh, they're taking our jobs, they disagree with us, and it's like, yeah, but I would literally be sterilizing people and committing an atrocity that I think is probably one of the greatest things I could do. Like
and sorry, and why is it not a similar atrocity to make it illegal for millions of people to walk across a fence
because
in ways that would make their
they
lives
can live a
dramatically
life.
better?
They lived a life in their countries, so they can continue
And
to
you can
do
live a
so.
life even if you don't have kids. Like, I think that if you ask most people who
Yeah,
want
but
to immigrate here,
I'm exterminating a bloodline. I'm preventing
no,
the
it's not a
creation of
bloodline.
life.
You're no, I mean it would just be woke people. But I mean,
Yeah,
so
but
so
that
like,
is their genetic crop. Look, if you're going to say that wokeness is inheritable,
oh,
which a significant part of it is, because if you're going to quote Richard Hanea, whatever his last name is,
Hanania.
you know that that genetics play a role. So it's like
I mean,
I'm
yeah,
perfectly fine with that because they're American. They have invested in this place. And I think that can be solved. But again, I'm not going to bring in more people to this issue that are not Americans, that
uh,
aren't
I mean, I don't
entitled to
know.
those same things. And when it comes to sterilizing people, I just can't do that because I'm not preventing you from living your life. I'm just preventing you from doing it in my country. Preventing
Yeah,
someone from living and reproducing. I am a Christian, and I know you don't agree with that, so that's a whole other thing. But I fundamentally believe that depriving people of life, depriving them of their bloodline, depriving them of the ability to procreate and appreciate God in its entirety is entirely wrong. Me saying that you just can't come into my house and you have to work over there
yeah.
and build your own life.
Let's
And
be
there are
clear on
people.
what immigration does. It involves the government hiring men with guns that say that you're not allowed to come to a country, you're not allowed to cross a border, come on some land that you privately buy, and that if you try to do so, you'll be prevented by people with guns. It's not like it's not
I
just
think
like.
that's a great reduction of what's actually happening.
Well, I mean, it is literally what is happening. That is what happens when you pass immigration laws. And so
But
it's like
it's
it's not
extremely
it's not just like
reductionist.
it's not just like we're failing to benefit immigrants. No, we are passing a law that makes it illegal for doing something, for engaging in mutually beneficial transactions that would make their lives dramatically better. And I don't think that you're allowed to use the arm of the state to make the lives of millions of people dramatically worse based on some like ill-conceived worry about it having a deleterious effect on our culture, which I don't think there's any evidence of. But yeah. We can move on to the wages point, or if you want a last word on that, you get it.
Well, I was just going to say, the argument that it would make them worse off. We have no obligation to make their lives better. They're not citizens of this country. Governments are formed and borders are formed as a delegation of responsibility, ownership, and rules. And it's not just a guy at the border and enforcing this with a gun and, oh, you can't buy property here. It is the protection of laws. It is the protection of traditions, ideas. It's the protection of families, heritage, jobs. It is the protection of social fabric, because whether we like to accept it or not, people do have their own values that they did not grow up in America with. Immigrants of children of immigrants, sure, but that's not what I'm concerned about, because one party is race pandering to minorities. That's an issue in and of itself. But not only that, these people, whether we like it or not, are not going to have the same values as us, and I'm not going to import more people that don't share my values. I can rationalize with you because we fundamentally have grown up in the same country. These people have not, and I'm not going to deprive someone of the same opportunities that you might have. I'm not going to deprive you of certain opportunities in favor of someone that will work for a lower wage and didn't grow up here. You're an American, you speak my language, and we fundamentally believe in the greatness of this country. While we might come to different conclusions, we can agree on those things, and we want the best for Americans. And that's something we can do together.
Yeah.
But immigrants, it's not the same.
Okay.
It you care about your family more than you care about me.
Yeah, but I actually don't care more about like a random guy in North Dakota more than I care about a random guy in Guatemala. Like I don't have any special bond to the to the random guy in the middle of North Dakota. And there are like lots of people in other countries who I feel way more personal sympathy to than I do feel towards a lot of Americans. Like I just, just as a sort of a personal matter, I have way more sympathy towards like, the person who cares about America, who struggled to come here and make a better life for their children than I have about, random bums in the middle of, North Dakota. But I don't know. So, like I'm a utilitarian. And so I think if you're a utilitarian, this whole rhetoric about, caring about what happens to you when you're in the U.S. and not when you're in other countries, thinking that there's some magical drop off in the amount that you should that we should care about you when you cross the southern border. It's going to be ill conceived. But let me put on my non-utilitarian hat for a moment. I think that nearly everyone who's not a utilitarian, who thinks that people have rights and thinks things like this, will think that maybe we don't have any proactive obligation to benefit people in other countries, but we don't get to violate the rights of people in other countries, even if it benefits us a little bit, right? So, for example, it would not be okay to just like bomb other countries if that was good for the economy or something like that, or even if bombing other countries helped our culture by making it so that all the people, it created a rally around the flag effect. I think most people would think that senselessly bombing other countries would still be immoral in that case. And then I think that if you think that, then you should think that immigration restrictions are immoral. Immigration restrictions are not like they are the government using force to restrict people. They're not like the failing to help people. They are laws that make things illegal, that make it illegal for people to participate in mutually beneficial transactions, that make it illegal for people to purchase land. There's a paper that I'm co-authoring with a person named Perry Hendricks that we've sent to a few journals that argues basically that it extends an argument made by Brian Kaplan that immigration restrictions are worse than Jim Crow laws. And here's the basic picture, and I'd be curious what you make of this. So Jim Crow laws made it so that lots of people were restricted from various establishments. It made it so that, for many millions of Black people in the U.S., it was illegal for them to enter certain restaurants. It was illegal for them to work at various places, use various water fountains, things like that. Immigration restrictions make it so that it's illegal for many, many, many more people to enter many, many more establishments. So, an immigration restriction where we say, Juan from Mexico can't come to the U.S. That's like a law that makes it illegal for him to use.
So
use
why does Juan have an
sorry,
obligation to the rights afforded to Americans?
Can I just finish the point?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if we pass a law that says that Juan can't work at, various restaurants, well, an immigration restriction, it does that. It just also says that he can't work at any of the other restaurants or live anywhere else. So it's by definition more restrictive than Jim Crow laws would be if applied to immigrants. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Why does Juan have more of an obligation to any of the opportunities in America than an American citizen?
I don't. I didn't think he has more of an. I don't know what that question means. Why does he have more of an obligation to the opportunities?
Sorry. Why is it that Juan, our hypothetical immigrant in another country, why is he entitled to the same opportunities that an American gets? Is Guatemala America?
Well, okay, so let's say it's not. Maybe you think that the distinction that you're suggesting is that, well, the immigrants are in other countries, so immigration restrictions are imposed against foreigners, while Jim Crow laws were imposed against people in the U.S. But I don't know. This doesn't seem right. So, for example, suppose that we found out that we were very concerned of. Wait, sorry. Can I address that, and then you can make the other point? Yeah. So, suppose that we thought, for example, that that the real reason that immigration has a deleterious effect on our culture is because immigrants will go to various places that work with our cultures. They'll vote and be in places where other people are as well. Well, if we passed a law that said immigrants can come here, but they're not allowed to drink at the same water fountains as non-immigrants, they're not allowed to work at the same restaurants and businesses as non-immigrants, even if that had the same effects where it made it so that they couldn't significantly influence the culture and thus have a deleterious effect on our culture, even if it was nonpartisan, even if everyone supported it such that it didn't fracture our country, I think that most people would still think that it's immoral because you don't, even if people are in other countries, you don't get to basically impose Jim Crow laws. The claim is that they're worse than that. And, you can modify them. So you can make it so that, the worry is that they're taking low-skilled jobs. Well, you then make it so that immigrants can come to the U.S., but they have to not take the same low-skilled jobs as the rest of us or something, if that would have a positive effect on wages. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's not just low skilled or mid or high skilled labor. I don't want them to take any of the jobs for Americans. Like, the point of me asking that question is that there is an obligation to the people that live here. We vote and decide how things are run here. These people do not vote. These people do not contribute to our society. And just because they want to doesn't mean that they should get that obligation. And the reason being is because a society, like in the United States, is held together by its people. It's not by importing a bunch of others. And I fundamentally do believe in individual rights and not utilitarianism. And to say that we're benefiting the greater good, which I don't think is true, and that we're doing some mutually beneficial exchange, I don't believe that's true either. Say that we're doing that, even if both of those things were true, I still would disagree with it because it's extinguishing the rights of people that are already here, people that have toiled. Because, like I said, people will take lower wages if they have less when they come here, and most of them do have less. And let's say that they don't have less. Say that they're a wealthy family. Let's say that they're a wealthy family, or let's say that they're a very well-educated person. That's another well-educated American out of a job. The wages go down. This is economics too. Like, these are fundamental things.
Yeah, we'll talk about wages in a moment because I think you're wrong about it having a negative effect on wages. But
I don't think we're gonna agree on wages because, like, that's my area of study. I'm a business major, so I don't agree with that. And these innovations, like I said, I think a lot of the progress and advancement that we're so ready to take credit for because of immigration, I think a lot of it is outsized by the fact that they are using low wage labor from other countries. Sorry. And when it comes to the social aspect, there is inherently something different about being born in a country that has a specific culture and tradition. Like, we all speak the same language. We all share a same media, like the same entertainment and media and the same sports. Generally, everyone has different interests, but that a society is enclosed within its borders. That's how we decide where jurisdiction and who gets to contribute. And it's not Jim Crow, because Jim Crow was respecting people or restricting people that were entitled to rights in this
Yeah.
country.
Yeah.
People that
Okay.
don't
So
live here are not
okay.
citizens of the United States, and I don't believe in global citizenry. I think
Okay. Yeah.
I think different people form different cultures, and they should build that for themselves.
Yeah. So the thing you suggested is that basically Jim Crow laws were imposed against people here, while immigration restrictions are imposed against people in other countries. The people in other countries don't have the same rights as American citizens do. Uh, so um, so suppose that we found out that by unilaterally forcing Jim Crow laws against Mexico, that would make it so that Mexicans couldn't manufacture as many widgets as a result of making it so that they had to work less efficiently because we unilaterally imposed Jim Crow laws on them, which helped wages, and that this was very popular, so it would create a rally around the flag effect, making it so that it would help the culture of the U.S. This certainly seems like your claim of disanalogy wouldn't apply to this set of laws, even though this set of laws would clearly be morally wrong, given that we're stipulating that it has the same benefits as immigration restrictions, and that it's not being imposed on U.S. citizens, and it's being imposed on Mexicans. And so, what would you oppose that law? And if not,
Well, if you're saying a trade agreement that would result in protectionism or tariffs, that would
no. Sorry, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, imagine if the United States sent men with guns to carry out Jim Crow laws in Mexico, and imagine we as economists informed us that would be good for the wages of U.S. citizens, and that this would be very popular, so it would create a rally around the flag effect, and thus would get more people voting for Republicans, and also be good for the culture. Would you support that?
Well, that's not how that would work. The wages, if we were to conquer Mexico, that's kind of what this sounds like.
No, it's not conquering Mexico. It's unilaterally imposing Jim Crow laws on Mexico.
Yeah, I don't really understand what you mean. You're saying that we go over there and tell Mexicans that they can't do what they want in Mexico because we said it was good for us. That is an invasion of a country. You're basically saying that we're going to use our military to police them and tell them what they can do.
Yeah,
but we're not going to take them over.
Yeah, it's not really. It's an invasion, I think, but it wouldn't really be conquering them.
Yeah, so that's semantical, and that's really a straw man of what's happening, and it's attempting to paint this picture that somehow immigration laws are racist. Not really.
No. Sorry, that's not the picture that I'm trying to paint. I'm saying that that immigration laws are immoral and that they're worse than Jim Crow laws. And so
I agree that Jim Crow laws are immoral, but they're discriminating based on race to people that belong in the United States, and it's creating a
yeah, right. So okay, so what you're suggesting is that the reason why immigration restrictions are okay, and Jim Crow laws are not, is that one's being imposed on people in the U.S. and one's being imposed on people who are not in the U.S. And so, okay,
that's a mischaracterization of the point, because it's not about just where you live. People that live in the United States don't just live here. This is their home. They have contributed, and they have lived here. They have invested. Okay. They are invested into the society.
Yeah, so the distinction is that Jim Crow laws impose restrictions on, well, presumably you think Jim Crow laws don't produce the same benefits as immigration restrictions. That's number one. And then number two is that, number two is that Jim Crow laws are imposed on people who deserve to be here, while immigration restrictions aren't. And so my claim is that we can imagine a hypothetical scenario where we modify Jim Crow laws to be imposed on Mexico unilaterally, number one, and we can stipulate that it would create a rally around the flag effect, so it would have the same cultural benefit as the U.S. It would also cause lots of people to like Republicans and vote for Republicans, so it would have the same effect in terms of benefiting Republicans, and that by harming the economy of Mexico, it would help the wages of people in the U.S. I don't actually think that's how the economics could work, but we could stipulate there's some mechanism by which it would be good for the U.S. economy and help was skilled workers' wages. So the question is, so now, like what you said is that the reason why Jim Crow laws are wrong and immigration restrictions are fine is that it has characteristics X, Y, and Z. So I'm saying, okay, let's add characteristics X, Y, and Z to hypothetical Jim Crow laws. They still seem wrong, and yet it seems like on your view, it seems like these would be analogous to immigration restrictions, and yet they'd still be wrong. Therefore, immigration restrictions are wrong.
My question to you really is in a reply is, do I have free access to everything in your room? Do I have a free stake to all your little records and the trophies on the wall and the books?
No.
Do you have an equal stake on my TV back there?
No.
Okay, why?
Because you own your house.
Okay.
Or you
right.
own the things in your room.
So I have a claim to it, right?
Sure.
Okay. The point that I'm getting at here is that Americans have an inherent claim to this soil because they have been invested, they have lived here, they have been born here, their culture is here. This is what they've known. We do not owe that same. Fundamentally, people in other countries have not experienced those things, and you cannot add those characteristics in some hypothetical in some hypothetical question. A European, which is the closest thing to our culture, a European has no claim to this country. They have no claim to comment on our politics, to work a job here. They do not, like, nobody else belongs here except for Americans. Jim Crow discriminated against Americans. It is an obligation of a government.
Yeah.
The reason we form governments is so that people's individual rights are protected and that they are guaranteed representation in their government. They are protecting the rights of their citizens. Because I saw the look on your face when I said that. We have no obligation to protect the individual rights of citizens of other nations. And to this idea that we invade Mexico and not take it over, which, by the way, you admitted in this hypothetical scenario that even the economics and the premises of this hypothetical counterplan might not even hold up. But let's take it to the extreme and say that all these things.
I think we can imagine a hypothetical scenario where they do hold up.
Like, it will, okay, but it will not galvanize the country in some patriotic unification the way the Iraq War did, because this is an unprovoked attack on a border country taking the lives of people and oppressing them. See, this is the thing. If they have an equal claim to the United States, why don't we have an equal claim to everything in Mexico? Why can't we just pour over their border and colonize them?
Well, I think
it would be mutually beneficial. No, because there are
we should be allowed to immigrate.
Mexico.
Yeah, I think we should be allowed to immigrate to Mexico, but I don't think that many people would, because I think America is a better country. But okay, so returning to your point, so you're saying, okay, well, it wouldn't create a rally around the flag effect, and this is almost certainly true as a matter of the actual world. But the point is that you can imagine a hypothetical scenario where imposing Jim Crow laws on Mexico has all the benefits of immigration, and it still seems wrong. And then at that point, it's analogous to immigration. And it can't be that that immigration restrictions are being imposed on the people. And so you said, well, the people in the U.S., they have a claim to this land, while people in other countries don't have a claim to this land in the right sense. But again, we're talking about Jim Crow laws that are being unilaterally imposed on Mexico. And so, like, they don't have a claim to this land either. The point about how I can let other people out of my house. Let's be clear on what immigration laws are. Someone in Texas wants to sell their house to a Mexican citizen. The U.S. government comes in and says, no, it's illegal for you to sell your property to a Mexican citizen. It's illegal for you to sell your car to a Mexican citizen. It's illegal for you to voluntarily hire a Mexican citizen to work at your place of business. That's not failing to benefit Mexican citizens.
Well,
it's actively restricting their rights.
Saudi Arabians have property here, and they own pieces of land in Arizona. The Supreme Court just ruled on this. They own property here, and they don't live here. You can buy someone's car and have it shipped to you. You can own property. The argument is just that you're not going to become a citizen. You're not going to be entitled to the same
Well,
rights.
you
And
can
even if
you
you do
don't
contribute, even if you do contribute to this country, I do not care about your contribution. I only care about the contribution of the people that I share a heritage with. And there is like an undeniable fact that heritage and cultural unity matters, and bringing more people into this mix, whether they assimilate or not. The statistics, studies, whatever, all of these things can be skewed. They're not all encompassing, and statistics are easily manipulated. And we can go back and forth on data or evidence, but fundamentally,
yeah.
my point is all of these reasons that I've given you, it's not a unilateral imposition of Jim Crow laws restricting Mexicans from doing what they want to do in a place that they have a claim to. It's just saying, hey, you can't come over here. And the
Yeah,
reason
so
being is because it is our right to be able to decide who comes into our borders. And if we
why is it
have that right,
why is it all right to make it illegal for a person to drive a car across like a stretch of land between Texas and Mexico?
what do you mean? Like,
Like,
why is it
okay,
all
so
right to tell them
yeah,
they can't
so
cross the border?
yeah, I
Because
mean
we
that.
have a sovereign nation.
And why does having a sovereign nation mean that we have the right to restrict immigration?
Because a sovereign nation has a right to govern itself, and they can make any
Well,
law
no,
that
I
they
mean
want.
there. Well, wait. Well, no, I mean like there are some laws that you think would be illegitimate. So if
Because
we
we have a constitution.
well, no, presumably there are some laws that you think would be morally illegitimate, even if legally illegitimate. It would be morally illegitimate, for example, to just like start randomly bombing Mexico, just for completely unprovoked, even if that's
Well, I
legally
mean,
allowed.
in terms of international law, that would be illegal. But
No, but no,
yeah,
but even if nobody had ever erected any tenets of international law, it would be immoral to do that. Presumably, it would be a violation of the rights of people in Mexico
yeah,
to
sure,
start
sure.
bombing them.
So we have the
So
legal
the question
power to
is,
do
why isn't
something
immigration a similar violation of rights? I mean, like it.
because it's immoral to bring in more people here when people that are in this country are already struggling. Juan from Guatemala does not deserve the job over some bum in North Dakota. He lives here. He deserves an opportunity. If we help him out, that's less crime for us. That's less social pressure. That's a more unified society. That's higher wages. And you will be forced to innovate because you're not going to have access to this poor wage labor that boost your profit margin. You actually have to compete and make a product of substantive quality because you're not working with some like
What you're pointing out is that
basic
there's some.
slavery.
What you're pointing out is that there's some. You're saying that they have no right to be in the U.S. But why is that the case? Why is it the case that you don't have the right to buy land and walk across a stretch of land? Pointing out that there's some social utility that does not justify restricting people's rights. And so the question is, why isn't it the right for people to immigrate?
Because a government is elected and formed by people within its borders, and they draw up those borders, and other countries usually agree upon them. If not, they have border disputes. But right now we don't have a border dispute. So the people within this land agree to some basic consensus that this is going to be the government, these are going to be the borders, and these are going to be the powers enumerated.
The fact that a government is created and elected to do something does not mean that that thing is morally legitimate or is not a violation of rights. If, for example, one erected a government specifically to bomb Mexico and wrote that into the Constitution, that would still be morally illegitimate and would be a violation of rights. And so you
Sure, but
can't.
you're asking me why is it morally legitimate that a government has this authority? It's because it is created by the people to protect them and enforce their laws
Yeah,
and
no.
systems.
Look, so it can't be the case that they have the authority because that's the purpose with which the government was created, or that's enshrined in the Constitution. That doesn't give them the moral authority to do lots of other things that are rights violations. And so, if it is a rights violation, which it seems to be, then to make it illegal for people to cross.
Why do you think it's a moral violation?
Well, because I think that if you make it illegal for people to generally it's seen as a rights violation if you impose grievous harm on other people. and make their lives dramatically worse.
Okay,
And
but we're
so,
not imposing harm upon them.
well, we are. If you make it illegal for a person to go to a
And again,
particular place,
this is a trade-off issue.
if you make it illegal for a person to go to a particular place that would make their life dramatically better, you are making their life dramatically worse. I don't really I actually think that immigration is one of the areas where there isn't really much of a trade-off. Like, I actually think
Okay,
that immigration is just kind of win-win-win.
Does that mean if you're
Now,
saying
given we've
denying
been
them
going
this?
for a while, now might be a good time to switch to wages. But if you want to make a last point, and maybe if you say something crazy, then I'll respond to that. But if not,
Well, I guess I'll kind of make my final case because I have to get to bed for work tomorrow. But I will say, in terms of the moral authority of, oh, we need to do the most good, that would mean that we have some ability to go steal from the rich because you're denying that poor person a chance to eat. And okay, that's a very extreme hyperbole. What about someone crosses over this border illegally, and because we've all voted on it, we've all agreed that these are the borders, and we've all agreed that there is some fundamental regulation we need to have to the people that are going to vote and decide on the laws of this country. You can't just walk over here and vote because you don't have a stake in it. But how is it not stealing food out of someone else's mouth if they come here and take a job that isn't that they didn't invest to, they didn't pay any taxes, they didn't grow up here. They're stealing a job from someone here. That theft in itself is immoral. So I'm not going to let someone come over here to steal from someone here. We live in a sovereign nation with borders, and we agree that protecting the rights of individuals is a good thing. So we agree through consensual governance, which is good because no one's being forced. So we've established that we're promulgating this government for the protection of us, which is good, and we do it consensually, which is good. So the government has a moral claim to the laws and powers of its land. And with that consensus and the power to protect individuals' rights, we say within this border, we're going to protect rights. Why? Because protecting rights is inherently good. We don't want people to get smashed over for the quote unquote common good. So we say, no, you cannot come over here and steal our jobs. No, you are not entitled to our taxes. No, you are not entitled to our jobs. And no, you are not entitled to the benefits of this country. The only people that are entitled to it are the people that were innately born with it, which is the people within this country. The people that founded this country should not have to sacrifice any opportunities on the behalf of their children so that someone else can just come in. There is in the same way that when you buy in early to a stock, you have equity and it is more valuable. People that have bought into this country and been here for longer deserve equity stake and deserve fair compensation for that. So it is immoral to allow others to come over here and deprive them of those same opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, just on in terms of the point about how they're stealing jobs. Generally, we think that if you if I take a job that you wanted, someone hires me instead of you. We don't think I'm violating your rights. So it's not, it can't be justified by providing rights violation. I think the rest of the stuff you said, we've discussed it earlier. But yeah, I think maybe you said you have to get to bed. Now is a good time to stop. If people are curious, because we never got to talk about wages. I have an article that's linked in the comments where I decisively debunk the worry that immigration will have a deleterious effect on wages. But yeah, thanks Aidan for coming on and for discussing. Have a good one, everyone.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It really is a nuanced topic, so I'm really glad we get to go into such depth and have a really good discussion. I enjoyed it, so thank you.
All right, have a good one.
If you ever want to do this